The first ray of sunlight hadn't even crept over the manicured hedges when the silver SUV rolled slowly down Maple Grove Lane. Its tinted windows reflected the pristine suburban landscape, a mirror of artificial perfection that masked the simmering tension beneath. Mark Reynolds gripped his coffee mug so tightly his knuckles turned white, watching the vehicle crawl past his property line. Another HOA patrol. Again. The Weber family had lived on the outskirts of Willow Creek Estates for just over 2 years, and from day one, the Homeowners Association had made their life a living hell. What started as polite notifications had morphed into weekly invasive inspections, increasingly aggressive letters, and a campaign of harassment that seemed designed to drive them out. Sarah Weber stood beside her husband, her arms crossed, a mix of anger and determination etching lines around her eyes. "They're not going to win," she muttered, more of herself than to Mark. The property they purchased was technically at the edge of the planned community, nestled against a patch of undeveloped woodland. Their home sat on a peculiar plot of land that seemed to exist in a jurisdictional gray area. The HOA didn't see it that way. Mark remembered the first confrontation clearly. It was a crisp autumn morning when Robert Hartley, the HOA president, had appeared on their doorstep. Impeccably dressed in a tailored navy blazer with a clipboard that seemed more like a weapon than an administrative tool, Hartley had cited no fewer than 17 alleged violations. The grass was 2 inches too long. The mailbox was half an inch off the prescribed color code. The garden gnomes, apparently forbidden, were an aesthetic disruption. But something never quite added up. Sarah, a real estate attorney by profession, had an instinct for legal nuance that went beyond most people's understanding. She'd been meticulously collecting every piece of documentation since the first complaint. Property deeds, survey maps, county records, her home office looked like a detective's investigation board. The SUV completed its slow crawl, the driver, a middle-aged man Mark recognized as one of Hartley's lieutenants, making notations on a clipboard. They were watching, always watching. But they didn't know what Sarah was about to discover. Last night, buried in a stack of old county planning documents, she'd found something. A map. A boundary line. A technicality that could change everything. "They have no idea," Sarah said, a slight smile playing on her lips. The morning light caught the gleam in her eye, the look of someone who knew something significant was about to unravel. Mark understood that look. In their years of marriage, he learned that when Sarah got that particular expression, the world was about to shift on its axis. The HOA thought they were dealing with just another suburban couple, people who would eventually conform, bend, submit to the endless rules and regulations that govern their meticulously planned community. They were wrong. Dead wrong. As the SUV disappeared around the bend, Mark turned to Sarah. "What did you find?" he asked, knowing full well that the answer would be more than just a simple piece of information. It would be a weapon. Sarah's smile widened. "Everything," she said simply. The county recorder's office was a labyrinth of dusty file cabinets and decades-old documents. Sarah Weber moved with surgical precision, her fingers tracing lines on yellowed maps and property records that most people would have overlooked as meaningless bureaucratic debris. Mark had learned long ago that what seemed like chaos to others was a meticulously organized puzzle in Sarah's world. "Here," she muttered, spreading out a series of documents on the worn wooden table. The overhead fluorescent light cast a harsh glow on the intricate boundary lines, survey markers, and legal descriptions that had consumed her every waking moment for the past 3 weeks. Robert Hartley, the HOA president, had no idea what was coming. The harassment had escalated beyond simple patrols. Last month, they'd received a formal violation notice threatening significant fines. A $500 penalty for unauthorized landscaping modifications. Another $750 for non-compliant exterior paint selection. The list went on, each line item more ridiculous than the last. But Sarah had discovered something fundamental. A critical error in the original community development plans that would change everything. Back home, Mark prepared for the inevitable confrontation. He knew his wife. This wasn't just about defending their property. This was about exposing a systemic overreach that had bullied countless homeowners into submission. Their property sat in a unique geographical anomaly. The original survey from 1983 showed a boundary line that the current HOA conveniently ignored. A small strip of land no more than a quarter acre that technically existed in a jurisdictional no-man's land. "They've been bluffing," Sarah said that evening, spreading the documents across their kitchen table. Her laptop displayed comparison maps, property records, and a chronological breakdown of every communication from the HOA. "They know they don't have actual legal authority over our specific plot." Mark looked at the evidence. Years of intimidation, of weekly patrols, of increasingly aggressive notices, all built on a fundamental legal fiction. The next morning, Sarah made a call that would set everything in motion, not to the HOA, not to their local government, but to the county's senior land use attorney, a contact she cultivated during her years of real estate practice. "I need you to verify something," she said, her voice calm and precise. "I think we've uncovered a significant jurisdictional error that impacts not just our property, but potentially dozens of others in the Willow Creek development." What started as a personal battle was about to become something much larger. The HOA had made a critical mistake. They'd chosen the wrong family to mess with. Mark watched his wife work, knowing that Robert Hartley and the HOA board had no idea what was coming. Sarah wasn't just preparing a defense. She was building a case that would dismantle their entire system of control. The weekly patrols would stop, and this was just the beginning. The community center's meeting room buzzed with tension. 37 homeowners sat clustered in small groups, their whispers creating a low, anxious hum. Sarah Weber stood at the back, her posture as crisp and precise as the legal brief tucked under her arm. Robert Hartley had called an emergency HOA board meeting, ostensibly to address ongoing community concerns. But everyone knew the real reason. The Webers were a threat, not just to the HOA's authority, but to its entire power structure. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hartley began, his voice tight with barely contained anger, "we are facing an unprecedented challenge to our community's established standards." Mark watched from the side, noting how Hartley's perfectly pressed shirt now seemed slightly rumpled, how a thin sheen of sweat had formed on his forehead. The confident bluster that had defined the HOA president for years was crumbling. Sarah's investigation had uncovered more than just a jurisdictional error. She discovered a pattern of systematic overreach that extended far beyond their single property. Old survey maps, forgotten county records, and a series of strategic legal communications had exposed the HOA's fundamental weakness. The bombshell came unexpectedly. "I have documentation," Sarah spoke up, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a surgical instrument, proving that approximately 47 properties in this development are not, in fact, legally bound by the HOA's current covenant restrictions. The room went silent. Hartley's face turned several shades of red. "That's impossible," he stammered, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed him. What had begun as a personal battle against weekly patrols and petty violations had transformed into something much larger. Sarah had methodically traced the development's original land parcels, identifying a critical surveying error made during the initial community planning in the early 1980s. Some properties, including theirs, were technically outside the original HOA boundaries. Decades of aggressive enforcement had been built on a legal house of cards. Mark watched the dominoes begin to fall. Elderly residents who had been fined for minor infractions perked up. Young couples who had been struggling under the weight of constant violations leaned forward. The room was transforming from a space of compliance to one of potential rebellion. "We've been collecting documentation," Sarah continued, "of every fine, every violation, every patrol that was issued to properties that were never legally within the HOA's jurisdiction." Hartley's legal counsel, a stern-looking woman in a gray suit, began frantically whispering. The board members exchanged nervous glances. Years of unchecked power were about to be dismantled. "This isn't just about our property," Mark muttered to Sarah. "This is about all of them." She nodded, a subtle smile playing at the corner of her mouth. The weekly patrols, the endless notifications, the culture of fear and control was all about to come crashing down. The HOA had made a fundamental mistake. They had chosen to bully the wrong family. And now, everyone would know it. As the meeting descended into chaos, Sarah and Mark exchanged a look. This was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The fallout was swift and unprecedented. Within weeks, the local media picked up the story. What had started as a single family's dispute with their homeowners association had become a landmark case of bureaucratic overreach. Investigative reporters descended on Willow Creek estates, digging into decades of questionable enforcement practices. Sarah's phone became a constant hub of activity. Homeowners from not just their development but surrounding communities began reaching out. Some wanted legal advice. Others wanted to share their own stories of HOA harassment. A support group formed almost overnight with Sarah at its center. Robert Hartley's world was unraveling. The county launched a formal investigation into the HOA's practices. Years of collected fines came under scrutiny. Bank accounts were frozen. Ward members were called in for questioning. What had once been an untouchable local power structure now looked like a house of cards ready to collapse. Mark watched the transformation with a mixture of pride and disbelief. His wife had done more than fight a personal battle. She had exposed a systemic problem that affected hundreds of homeowners. "They never expected someone to actually fight back," Sarah said one evening, reviewing yet another batch of documents. Stacks of files covered their dining room table, a war room of legal evidence. The legal challenge wasn't just about their property anymore. It had become a movement. Local politicians began to take notice. A state representative approached Sarah about potential legislation to prevent similar HOA overreaches. Consumer protection lawyers saw an opportunity for class action lawsuits that could potentially return millions in improperly collected fines. But the personal cost was significant. Their home became a target. The weekly patrols had stopped, but something more insidious took their place. Anonymous complaints, suspicious vehicles parked nearby, late-night hang-up calls. The HOA and its supporters were fighting back in the only way they knew how, through intimidation. Mark installed security cameras. Sarah documented every incident meticulously. The turning point came unexpectedly. A whistleblower from within the HOA contacted Sarah, a longtime board member who had grown disillusioned with the organization's tactics. Boxes of internal documents appeared on their doorstep one night. Emails, financial records, correspondence that painted a damning picture of systematic harassment and financial misconduct. "They're finished," Sarah said, spreading the documents across their kitchen table. Her eyes gleamed with the same determination that had driven her investigation from the start. Mark understood now that this was about more than just winning. It was about justice, about standing up to a system that had bullied homeowners for decades. The final battle was approaching, and the Webbers were ready. As the sun set on Willow Creek Estates, a quiet revolution was brewing. One document, one family, one incredible fight against a system that had gone unchallenged for far too long. 2 years had passed since that first confrontational HOA meeting. The landscape of Willow Creek Estates had changed forever. Sarah Webber stood on the front porch of their home, watching as the last of the moving trucks pulled away from Robert Hartley's property. The once powerful HOA president was leaving town, his reputation in tatters. Multiple lawsuits, a state investigation, and public humiliation had stripped away everything he once controlled. The settlement had been historic. Hundreds of homeowners received refunds for improperly collected fines. The HOA's board was completely dissolved. A new democratically elected community association was formed with strict oversight and transparent practices. Mark joined her, sliding an arm around her waist. "Quite a view," he said quietly. Their fight had become more than a personal victory, and had sparked a broader movement. State legislators had drafted new laws protecting homeowners from HOA overreach. Community groups across the state were using their case as a blueprint for challenging unreasonable housing authorities. The whistleblower from the HOA, a woman named Elena Rodriguez, had become a close friend. She now worked with a nonprofit that helped homeowners understand their rights, inspired by the Webbers' relentless pursuit of justice. "We never wanted to be activists," Sarah reflected, watching a group of neighbors gathering for a community barbecue, something that would have been unthinkable under the old regime. "We just wanted to be left alone." They had become so much more. The weekly patrols that had once terrorized the neighborhood were nothing more than a distant memory. In their place was a community that had learned to stand up to question, to fight back. Mark squeezed her hand. Their son Tommy ran across the lawn, playing with neighbors' children, free from the oppressive rules that once governed every aspect of their lives. "Would you do it all again?" he asked. Sarah's smile was answer enough. The sun began to set over Willow Creek Estates, no longer a fortress of petty regulations, but a community reborn. And it had all started with one family's refusal to back down. In the distance, where the HOA's patrol SUVs once crawled menacingly down the street, children rode their bikes. Neighbors talked. Gardens flourished, without a single violation notice in sight. Justice, they had discovered, was not about winning. It was about standing up, speaking truth, and creating change. One property line at a time,